This is the Thriving Dentist Show with Gary Takis, where we help you develop your ideal dental practice, one that provides personal, professional, and financial satisfaction.
Welcome to another episode of the Thriving Dentist Show. I'm Gary Takis, your podcast co-host. The title of this episode is 10 Must-Read Books for Dentists. Those of you that know me know I'm a voracious reader. We do book club at Life Smiles with our team members. We also do book club with our clients, my coaching clients. And now I'm going to share with you what I believe are 10 must-read books for dentists that'll make a massive difference in your practice and make a massive difference in your life. But hey, before we get to that podcast episode, two quick announcements. First announcement that I have is coming up on May 15th, 16th, and 17th is our final Thriving Dentist live stream MBA workshop. This is a 9-hour workshop spread out over 3 evenings. It's Monday night, Tuesday night, Wednesday night, 7 to 10 p.m. Eastern time. Go ahead and do your time translation wherever you're located, but that's 7 to 10 p.m. Eastern time. You'll get 9 hours of CE credits. And what I cover in that MBA workshop is quite literally everything you need to know from a business standpoint to have a thriving practice. And a thriving practice is defined by one that provides personal, professional, and financial satisfaction. I cover the 10 elements of a thriving practice. I cover the 24 systems of a thriving practice, 7 very specific goals for every thriving practice. And essentially, it's the practical equivalent of an MBA. By the way, we had made a decision internally to sunset the MBA workshop, and we decided we'd do our last one at the end of 2022. However, we didn't really announce that that was the last one, and we got lots of feedback early in this year saying, hey, I want to see a schedule for when the MBA workshop's going to be available in 2023. And when we had so much of a response, we decided we'd do it one more time. This is it. This will be the last one. We won't do it again. We'll be spending our focus more on master classes. Master classes are those 3-hour topical workshops that we do. We'll be doing lots of new master classes, but this will be the last Thriving Dentist MBA live stream workshop. If you're interested, come join us. Very inexpensive, maybe the least expensive CE credits you can earn. You get 9 hours of CE credits. We make it very affordable. Of course, it's done from the comfort and convenience. You can consume this from the comfort and convenience of your home or office. However, it is done live. So you can ask questions, and why we call it a live stream workshop. Again, May 15th, 16th, and 17th. Go to thrivingdentist.com/MBA. Again, thrivingdentist.com/MBA to register, and I'll look forward to seeing you there. The second announcement that I have is we have a returning guest for a top clinical tip. This is Dr. Pavel Krastev. You'll recognize his wonderful voice. Dr. Krastev has joined us. He's going to share with you some tips for successful insertion of all ceramic crowns. I love these tips that he's providing, and so will you. Without any further ado, here's the top clinical tip from Dr. Pavel Krastev.
Hello, my dear friends and colleagues on the Thriving Dentist program. This is Pavel Krastev, DDS from New York, and today I will yet share another tip that I think is fairly important in clinical dentistry. So my topic today is basically all ceramic crowns and the insertion of them. And I believe that most of us will agree that many clinicians these days have made the transition to scanning preparations with a scanner, and then having your all ceramic restorations fabricated that way. What I noticed with this technique, the accuracy and the bite and just all aspects of the fit are much superior in my judgment compared to traditionally made crowns. Now, having said that, usually in my experience so far, when you see all ceramic crowns done in the scanning method, The accuracy is impeccable. You almost never have to make any bite adjustments, contact adjustments, etc. But here's a little trick that I do before I talk about bonding them. When I do, whether it's a single unit or 6 units or multiples, I like to place them initially. Check the bite initially very lightly and gently so we don't fracture anything in case they're not seated all the way. And then what I do, I press them in with my fingers and I walk away for about 15 minutes or so. What this allows to happen is the ligaments of the teeth will adjust on a microscopic level. Okay, and believe it or not, many times when you first seat them, you notice that the margins may look a little bit open, and I mean a little bit, but when you give it 15-20 minutes and then come back and press them again, you will very often observe that now they're seated fully. And I think that's a key. Now, I am aware that time is precious for all of us, but if you take this extra step, you will realize that the seating will be even that much better. Having said that, the next thing I'd like to mention is when you're bonding them on, first of all, you never should cement with conventional cements all ceramic restorations because they will fall out eventually and probably sooner than later. So what I like to do, in my practice, I almost exclusively use Reliex. And what I do is, once everything is checked and ready and the contacts have been inspected, I will do the etching, the priming, whatever system you're using is fine. And then when I light cure them, the initial cure I only do about 4 seconds. Let me say that again. Only about 4 seconds on the buccal and the lingual. Then what I do is clean all the excess bonding materials, and they will literally flake off the teeth pretty easily. If you cure them the full amount of time, what will occur is you will have a nightmare cleaning the excess cements, and I shouldn't say cements, bonding agents and the resin cement. They set extremely hard, and especially in between the contacts, it becomes very difficult, and you very often have to resort to using a very fine diamond tip burr. And again, I don't like to do that because you end up putting scratches in the ceramics, and we really want to try to avoid that. So once again, I repeat, when you seat them, give them some time for the ligaments to expand and adjust, push them down a little more, recheck your bite, recheck your contacts, make sure the patient is happy with the aesthetics, and then 4-second cure, very light with the light. I usually have my assistant do that. And then flake off all the excess, go in between with the floss gently so you don't pull them off since they're not fully set, and then do your full cure. And I think that will cause you to have greater success and less headaches when it comes to the cleanup. So thank you very much for your joining us today. And once again, thanks to the Thriving Dentist Organization for giving me the opportunity yet again. Good day, everyone.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Thriving Dentist Coaching and Action segment. This is Naren, your co-host. We're going to do something different today. Typically, we do a coaching and action segment followed by a Q&A segment, where we go through 4 to 5 questions from all of you from around the world. Today, we won't have the Q&A segment. We are only going to have the coaching and action segment, and you will know why. The topic today is 10 must-read books for dentists. 10 must-read books for dentists. Both Gary and I are devoted to this idea of continual improvement, and we are always trying to get new ways of looking at the world, new ways of thinking, so we can hopefully, change our game and go to the next level. And we do that. Gary does that with his clients. And a favorite quote that both Gary and I share is this quote from Wayne Dwyer, who said, "Change the way you look at things, and the things you look at change. Change the way you look at things, and the things you look at change." In other words, he's saying that there are ideas that can transform your life. You just have to, understand and embrace those ideas. So in today's 10 must-read books for dentists, Gary is going to pick some of the best books on the planet. Doesn't matter whether you are a dentist or not. Plus some books that are really tailored to dentists. And he's going to kind of talk about why these are the 10 best books for dentists and why every one of you must read them. So I'm really excited about this episode, Gary, because I love books. You love books. I have to confess, I haven't read all the 10 books on your list, but I have read many of them. So I'm really excited about today's episode.
You know, Naren, the hard part for me in preparing for this episode was picking only 10. You know, I have quite literally hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of books in my library. And I'm a voracious reader, have been since I was a young boy. And reading has been in the fabric of my life forever. One of the really cool things today is working with my 3-year-old grandson and discovering that he is developing a passion for reading as well. So we're nurturing that at a very young age. And,
does he use the phonics system, like to sound words out?
So, you know, some of you know that my wife taught kindergarten. Therese taught kindergarten for many, many years. She was a kindergarten teacher.
Right.
She retired from teaching kindergarten, and she followed her second passion, which is all things yoga. So she has multiple yoga certifications. She has a yoga studio, and her life, like my life is all about dentistry, her life is all about yoga. But her prior career as a kindergarten teacher makes her well suited to work with our grandkids to help them understand reading. And so our 3-year-old grandson, Kanan, is enjoying reading, and we're planting a seed that hopefully will be lifelong in his life. So the hard part for me was coming up with just 10, but I did it. And I'm very happy with this list. Very happy with this list for sure. So for now, these are my top 10 must-read books for dentists. And as you indicated, Naren, every one of these books can be applied directly in your practice. There is information that can be directly applied to your practice. Some of them are specifically written by and for dentists, 2 in particular that I'm going to list. But the others are more of a general reading, but they can be absolutely applied in your practice. I'm going to number each one. I'll list the title and the author, and then just share some quick insights on each book. Let me go ahead and get started. And these are not numbered in importance. I would call them, all 10 of these, equally number 1. Does that make sense? Is that
all
possible?
Stars. Yes, they're all stars.
Yeah,
Hall of Famers.
They're all number 1. They're all Hall of Famer books. I'll number them 1 through 10, though, so I can remember to cover all 10. All right, number 1. It is a classic. How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. How to Win Friends and Influence People. Now, I'll bet that virtually every one of our listeners is aware of that book. Not
Yes.
that you've read it, but is aware of it, because it is an all-time classic. How to Win Friends and Influence People. Let me tell you why I chose this book. Because if you're going to develop a thriving practice, you are absolutely going to have a relationship-driven practice. Part of a thriving, a necessary ingredient of a thriving practice is that it's relationship-driven. And I'm going to suggest that if your practice isn't relationship-driven, it's not a thriving practice.
Right.
I'll go that bold as to say that. And if you really want to learn how to master the behavioral side of dentistry, if you're going to have a relationship-driven practice, you have to master behavioral skills. And that book, quite literally, is a guide that can help you master your behavioral skills. Now, I'm going to explain this. I have to explain this in such a way that makes sense. I've had clients over the years, Naren, that have said, you know, I'm just not strong on the behavioral sciences. I'm just not strong on the communication skills and behavioral science and relationship building. And I've said, but here's the good news. Even if you weren't born with those skills, you can learn those skills. And usually what I see when we're face to face is their eyebrows go up and it's like, you mean I can learn it? I said, absolutely. And one of the best ways to learn that is by reading the book, How to Win Friends and Influence People. Now that one's one of the few books that's not available on Audible, How to Win Friends and Influence People. So I actually have to read that book, How to Win Friends. It was written so long ago, they didn't have Audible capabilities back then, but it is as relevant today as it ever was. There's updated editions, updated intros, and that sort of thing. But the book, How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie, is one right at the top of the list. We actually read this at Life Smiles as book club with all of my team members because we wanted our team members to develop, their behavioral skills as well. And this would be a really good book to include in book club with your team members. How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. Number 2, another classic, another one that I'll bet all of you have at least heard of the title. If you haven't read it, you should. And this is 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey. 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Now, that book, the history of that book is that Stephen Covey was a professor at BYU, and he did a 20-year study over 20 years. So at Brigham Young University, he did a 20-year study on people from all different walks of life that whatever their career was, they could have been in business, they could have been in politics, they could have been in sports, been in nonprofit agencies. Whatever they did, they were very effective at what they did. And that 20-year study he was looking for what was the common denominators, what were the habits, what were the things they did as part of what they contributed to their success. And through that 20-year study, he discovered that there were 7 habits. 7 habits. And if you want to be an effective practice owner, I'll just substitute what you are as a listener. I hope you're an effective practice owner. You'll read the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People and apply each one of those habits in your life.
Thank you, Gary. These 2 books are amazing. I have to say, Dr. Covey's book, Stephen Covey's book, changed my life. I was 18 when I read it. I used to have those cassette tapes. A colleague of mine, I was doing an internship, said, "Hey, here it is. You should listen to it." So I had this long drive. So I'd listen to it again and again and again. I didn't really totally start understanding and appreciating it. It's almost like wine. The longer you think about it, the longer you use it, you're like, this guy is a genius. And the funny thing is, it's only 7 habits. It's not 79. It's not 7,000. It's just 7. And they are like life-changing. And to add to your point, it's not only about practice, it's also about being a father. In other words, this will apply to every part of your life. A husband, a good person in the community. I think this is just one of those books that makes you a better human being.
Naren, my oldest granddaughter, Juliana,
Right.
the elementary school that she attended was a magnet elementary school. And the elementary school teaches these 7 habits to the elementary school children. Right. Quite literally from kindergarten through 6th grade. And one year for Father's Day, I'm her grandfather, of course, but for Father's Day, she gifted me a hand-painted sign with all 7 of these habits, painted on the sign, and it hangs in my office as a source of pride for sure. But 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey.
And
number 3,
the other book, the book about Dale Carnegie. Just wanted to say one thing. Again, it's an amazing book. I didn't read it when I was young. I read it maybe in my 30s, but he again makes it so simple. It's about people, right? It's about human beings. And unfortunately, in the technology world we live in, we almost forget everything is there to serve human beings. All of us are here to serve human beings. Whether it's your wife who used to be a kindergarten teacher or a yoga instructor, or you, the coach, me running a marketing company, we're all here to serve somebody. At the end of the day, it's about people. And that book is about how to have friends and how to, work with others. It's amazing.
Yeah, it has made a massive difference in our practice, and all of our team members strive to embrace the concepts they learned in How to Win Friends and Influence People. All right, number 3, another fantastic book. I debate, which is my favorite. This is another one that I'd put in that same category. The book Good to Great by Jim Collins. An absolute favorite of mine. In this book, Good to Great, Jim Collins did some analytical studies of businesses that made the progression from good to great. And he measured them by very specific analytical performance criteria. And he would identify a company that made the transition from good to great with a company in the same industry that didn't make the transition from good to great. And he explained the differences between the two. So, for example, one of them was a bank, and he described the bank that made the transition from good to great. Then he chose another bank that didn't and contrasted the differences. Well, when Paul and I bought Life Smiles in May of 07, we wanted to have a guide. And I had recently read the book Good to Great, and I was so impacted by it. I said, Paul, I actually think that this book could be our blueprint in our first year of ownership. If we simply followed the concepts, because we wanted to take what we thought was a good practice, when we bought it, it needed a lot of work. It was a total fixer-upper, but we thought we had good bones. And we wanted to take the practice from a good situation to great. And we read that book together, he and I, and we applied those concepts in our first year, like a blueprint, like an action step blueprint. I've done this with book club with my clients, and it has made a massive difference in their life. The book Good to Great by Jim Collins. This book is available on Audible if you prefer to listen. Jim Collins actually reads the Audible version or narrates it. So I always like it when the author narrates their own book because they emphasize the things they want to emphasize. So if you're more of a listener than a reader, then here's one that you can, the format can suit your preferred format by listening to it through Audible. Good to Great.
On the book, Good to Great, Gary, I think the first two authors, they are no longer with us. They both passed, correct? Dale Carnegie quite a few years ago or decades ago, and then not too long ago.
Stephen Covey passed in the early 20-teens. I believe it was 2013 that Stephen Covey passed, and we lost a tremendous human being for sure.
Right. Now, Jim Collins is still alive, and I remember running across, he has written a bunch of other books too. Built to Last is another book I liked. And I remember running across a website where he has these 1 minute, 2 minute videos where he explains some of those concepts. So if anybody wants snapshot versions of what he's teaching, maybe you could just Google and look for some of those videos.
Yeah, I think of all these authors as mentors in my life.
Right.
Aaron, I had the privilege of meeting Stephen Covey, actually physically meeting him. But I've never met Jim Collins, but I think of him as a mentor because in his writing, in his videos, in his newsletter, in all the different formats that he makes his content available, he is mentoring me, and he can be that mentor for you as well. All right, number 4, a more recent book that I love is called Leaders Eat Last by Simon Sinek. That's an author that most of you will recognize the name. He's written multiple New York Times best-selling books. Leaders Eat Last is another one. And we chose that book, and we did it recently with our clients because our clients wanted some more practical, like consumable information on how they can improve their leadership. Another fantastic book, Leaders Eat Last. There are so many takeaways from that book. And if you're going to have a thriving practice, you're going to need to develop your leadership skills. In fact, I might suggest that the trajectory of your career, in other words, how far you can go as a dentist, will not be your clinical skills. It won't be limited by your clinical skills. But it might be limited by your behavioral skills and your leadership skills. And if you can develop your behavioral skills and your leadership skills, then quite literally, you will have no ceiling, no glass ceiling on how far you can go in your career. You can become the best dentist you could possibly become by mastering behavioral skills, as well as leadership skills. Leaders Eat Last by Simon Sinek. And he also narrates the Audible version of that book. And he emphasizes the things he wants you to really get from that book. Love listening to that. Naren, Amazon loves me because every book that I buy in 3 formats. I buy in physical book format because I still like to highlight and make notes in margins. I buy the Audible version because I like to listen when I'm running or on long drives. I like to listen on flights. And then I also buy the ebook version of it so I can have it in my e-reader. So in the form of an 8-ounce tablet, I can have 250 books and can read those that way. So Amazon loves that I buy each one of the books in 3 formats. All right, number 5, a really quick read. This is one that you can read in about 45 minutes. The 1 Minute Manager by Ken Blanchard. The 1 Minute Manager. It is timeless. It's been updated by Ken, and there's a current version available right now called the 1 Minute Manager. And if you think, well, I need to learn more about management, I really like the concepts in 1 Minute Manager because they're things that you can quite literally apply. Now, Naren, I want to go a little bit deeper on one particular chapter of that book. This chapter is very short. Now, I read pretty quickly, so I read that chapter in about 5 minutes. I'm a very quick reader, but maybe it would take a normal reader 6 minutes to read that chapter, or 7 minutes. That's it. It was originally called the 1 Minute Reprimand, the 1 Minute Reprimand. And as he was working on future revisions, he had people that would advise him, and they must have thought the word reprimand was too harsh. So they changed the title of that book in more modern versions, more recent rewrites, to the 1 Minute Redirect. The 1 Minute Redirect. So maybe redirect is politically correct. I liked reprimand myself.
At least we all understand what reprimand means, right?
So it's now called the 1 Minute Redirect. Regardless of whether it's called, reprimand or redirect, you're going to have situations, doctor, as a practice owner, where you're going to have to meet with a team member and let them know their behavior is not acceptable. That's going to happen. If that has happened already, I would be absolutely shocked. That's going to, and I'm bold enough to say that's going to happen multiple times in your career. And you have to figure out a way to let your team members know that whatever they're doing is not acceptable, but do it in such a way that it doesn't tear them down. It doesn't tear them down. And when you learn the 1 Minute Reprimand and the 1 Minute Redirect, when you learn how to do that, you will have a tool on your toolkit that will be a tremendously effective tool for making corrections when necessary with your team members. 1 Minute Manager by Ken Blanchard. Pay particular attention to that chapter, the 1 Minute Reprimand or the 1 Minute Redirect. All right, we're halfway there. Number 6 is a dental specific book. It's titled A Better Way, and it's subtitled The Surprising Path to a Complete Life, which is the autobiography written by Peter Dawson. Now, Pete Dawson will not need any introduction to any of our listeners of the Thriving Dentist Show. Pete was just an absolute treasure. He was a friend. I worked with him very closely through his own teaching at the Dawson Academy, but also through Pankey. He was a tremendous contributor to content with the Pankey Institute, where I teach. And the book is amazing. The title says it all, A Better Way, and it's subtitled The Surprising Path to a Complete Life. Naren, you remember when we did this with book club with our clients, and this was a favorite. It's a quick read. It is, you literally pick it up and you won't want to put it down. You'll want to read it to completion. Because it's fascinating. What you'll discover about Pete is all of his interests within dentistry, but also you'll discover that he had many interests outside of dentistry. And I think that book provides maybe an example of how to have a complete life and how to have a very rewarding career in dentistry. Pete is humble. He's just profoundly bright. I think about his contributions in the world of occlusion and complex restorative dentistry. He tells lots of fun dental stories, but he tells lots of other stories that are outside of dentistry, and it is a fantastic read. And again, that would be A Better Way, subtitled The Surprising Path to a Complete Life, the autobiography of Peter Dawson. Number 7 is another dental specific book. It's titled A Philosophy of the Practice of Dentistry, written by Dr. L.D. Pankey. A brilliant, brilliant book. That book was out of print for many years. Yes. However, we did a project at the Pankey Institute to reprint that book. It took a lot of behind the scenes work to get it to be reprinted. We had to get approval from the families. Of course, Dr. L.D. Pankey passed away in 1989, but we had to get approval from the families, and they had the rights to the book and so on. And I'm very, very happy to report that the book is now available again, reprinted. It's available from the Pankey Institute. You can go to www.pankey.org. The Pankey Institute's a nonprofit. It is the only postgraduate dental institution that is a nonprofit. So go to pankey.org and look in their store, and you'll find the book, A Philosophy of the Practice of Dentistry. You'll learn the story of Dr. L.D. Pankey, which is fascinating. You know, when he graduated in 1923 from Louisville School of Dentistry in Louisville, Kentucky. And you have to remember what it was like practicing dentistry in the 1920s. Dentistry was about taking teeth out. Well, early in his career, Dr. Pankey decided that he wanted to learn how to save teeth rather than just take them out. And it was because of a profound personal experience that his mother had in having all of her teeth extracted, because that was what people did. She had her teeth extracted at age 42 while Dr. Pankey was in dental school. And it was such a sad reality. She was having an issue, and I'm not sure what the issue was clinically. It was probably something related to fillings or something. But rather than just having those fillings done, all of her teeth were extracted, and she had a set of dentures made. And she had that done because that was what was done that, in that time, that era. That's what people did. But she reported that she never had another comfortable a day the rest of her life. She lived to 87 years old. But so she lived another 45 years after she had her teeth extracted, but she never had another comfortable day the rest of her life. And that profoundly impacted Dr. Pankey. So he decided to commit his life to saving teeth. And the profession is all the better for it. Read this book. It can be applied in your own practice. There's so many different ways it can be applied. Philosophy of the Practice of Dentistry by Dr. L.D. Pankey. The next book, another really practical book. It's not dental specific, but it sure does apply to the practice. And that is the book, Crucial Conversations. Crucial Conversations. The subtitle for that book is Tools for Talking When the Stakes Are High. Tools for Talking When the Stakes Are High. Now, that was actually written by 4 authors. The authors are Patterson, Grenny, McMillan, and Swizzler. You'll be familiar with the book if you follow New York Times bestselling books. You'll be familiar with that book. But that's also a book that you can use as you improve and enhance your management skills, because you're going to need to have crucial conversations. The crucial conversation might be with a team member, it might be with a patient, it might be with one of your mentors, it might be with one of your children, it might be with your best friend. But I can assure you there will be times in your life where you'll need to have a crucial conversation. And it's great to have some tools on your tool belt when the stakes are high, because you want to make sure that that communication goes as planned. Tremendous book.
Absolutely. A couple of comments, Gary. I think the beauty of Dr. Pankey and Dr. Dawson is they lived a full life, like you said, and they lived a long life too, right? I mean, they really made a big difference in the lives of thousands of people, if not more.
Ironically, both of them, they're a slightly different era, but they were contemporaries of each other. Dr. Dawson was maybe a generation younger than Dr. Pankey. Both of them lived to 89 years old.
Right. So I think, again, it's a great book, especially for those mid-career and, late career dentists who are looking at, what about my legacy? What about, where do I want to go from my life? So it's a great book for, people of all ages because of who they are and how they live their lives. So I think that's a really good perspective. And also
both Dr. Dawson and Dr. Pankey. I had the privilege of meeting Dr. Pankey very early in my career, and he lit a fire under me. Dr. Pankey had two passions, many actually, but 2 very specific passions related to dentistry: complex restorative dentistry and the behavioral side of dentistry, the people side of dentistry. And I've sure met some amazing dentists in my career on the people side. I'm not sure I've met anyone that was as talented as Dr. Pankey in terms of understanding behavioral sciences. He lit a fire. When he learned I was interested in the behavioral side of dentistry, he lit a fire under me that now 41 years later burns as brightly today as it did when I met him in 1982. And Pete Dawson the same way. I think of Pete in so many fond ways. His contributions to our profession, his humility, his leadership by example, his faith. Peter Dawson was a man of absolute faith, practiced his faith. Very, very important part of his life. But you're right, both of those books can absolutely be applied in practice. Darren, comment on Crucial Conversations. You were part of that book club, Crucial
absolutely.
Conversations.
Yeah, I love that book. It's a different kind of a book than many of the other books that Gary has talked about, in the sense it's very specific. It really gets into lots of examples and situations. Like,
it's very practical.
Very practical. It's almost like a cookbook. If this happens, here is the recipe for it. If this happens, here is it. So, and it talks about the kind of challenges that practice owners have. Like, for example, people can't come to a decision. Like, everybody's stuck. Like, what do you do? Right. How do you talk to somebody, who you need to have a tough conversation with? Like, how do you have that conversation with an employee? So
that book came up yesterday in my work as a coach. Right. And I won't use names because I didn't ask for permission, so I won't use names on this, but I'll share the situation. I had a Zoom meeting with a client of mine, current client of mine. And she said, Gary, I need some guidance. I have a team whose behavior is disruptive and corrosive. Her behavior, it's got to be addressed. This is a relatively new practice owner. And she said, I never had to deal with this when I was an associate dentist. That was something that went to the owner of the practice or the office manager. And she said, now I have to deal with it. And I'm out of my league. I don't know what to do, but I've got to do something because the behavior is corrosive, and she has to understand that this behavior is not acceptable. We have to make changes. And yet I value her, and I'm hopeful that she can make some changes. So I recommended this book because think about it, Aaron, the subtitle of the book, Crucial Conversations, Tools for Talking When the Stakes Are High. Are the stakes high in this situation?
Oh, absolutely.
If she doesn't do it, and think about the climate that we're in right now. If a team member is looking for another job right now, they can find another job in dentistry in very short period of time. There's such a critical shortage of team members. So she wants to keep this team member, provided this team member can make the necessary changes in her behavior. And so the stakes are absolutely high. So I said, read this book, listen to the book. And then let's walk through a specific plan for you to have that crucial conversation with her. I'm convinced that the answer lies within the pages of that book. And those would be skills that the client can put on her toolkit, because this won't be the last time any of us will have a crucial conversation in our life, for sure.
Yeah, during the book club, you talked about Dr. Dawson and his focus on work-life balance. Can you touch on that? Because I think he was a role model for that, wasn't he?
Yeah, and if the subtitle of the book, The Surprising Path to a Complete Life. What you'll discover by reading that book is that Pete Dawson absolutely, had a complete life, had work life, his hobbies, his interests, his range of people that he had in his life. And really, it's a great book as motivation to achieve work-life balance. For a long time, Naren, I had 6 specific goals for a thriving practice. And recently I've added a 7th one. And the 7th goal is to achieve an effective work-life balance. Because I believe if you achieve the other 6 goals, let me go through all 7 right now, just to rattle through those very quick. Number 1, overhead no higher than 60%, ideally 50%. 50% is very difficult right now, but we can get it to 60% or less for sure. Goal number 1. Goal number 2, the ability to create financial independence from your practice. So you can go to work because you want to, not because you have to. Goal number 3, to have all the technology that makes dentistry fun for you and still have overhead less than 60% in your practice. Number 4, a high performance team that you truly love and enjoy working with. Number 5, patients you enjoy taking care of. Number 6, a treatment mix that gives you satisfaction, doing the kind of dentistry you like to do. And goal number 7, to achieve an effective work-life balance. I think any of our listeners would agree that if you could achieve those 7 goals, you would in fact have a wonderful practice, a thriving practice. It would meet the definition of a thriving practice. And so, yeah, you're right, Aaron, as a guide. So if you're wondering, hey, can a dentist ever achieve a work-life balance? Well, read the book, A Better Way, The Surprising Path to a Complete Life by Peter Dawson. All right, number 9 is not a dental specific book, but it has direct application to dentistry. It's called Beat the Heart Attack Gene by Dr. Bradley Bale. Brad Bale, MD. He's a physician. The book is not written for the professions. It was written for the public. It's a New York Times bestseller. But it's all about how, even if you're genetically susceptible to heart disease, how you can beat the heart attack gene. And the book is a fantastic book about the oral systemic connection from a physician's perspective. And one of the quotes in that book, Beat the Heart Attack Gene, is, wait for it, Naren, wait for it. Are you ready for this?
Yes.
All good health begins with the mouth. And that's by a physician,
Right.
an MD, not a DDS or a DMD. By the way, Brad's a friend of mine, great author, great physician. He is spreading the word about the oral systemic connection for sure. By the way, Naren, we did an interview with Brad Bale on the Thriving Dentist Show. Let's put that interview. It was Tom Larkin and Brad Bale. Tom Larkin's a dentist that understands a lot about the oral systemic connection. Of course, Brad Bale as well. Let's put a link in the show notes for that interview. I'd encourage you to listen to it. He's fascinating. And he talks about how dentistry and medicine needs to work more closely together. And he's championing that cause. But that is a great book to read, Beat the Heart Attack Gene. If you feel like you need to kind of recalibrate your hygiene department to get serious about diagnosing and treating periodontal disease, if you feel like over the years, maybe you had that, but then it disappeared, or maybe you've never gotten serious about it. Well, periodontal disease is an epidemic in the population. It's time to get serious about diagnosing and treating periodontal disease. Reading that book with your hygiene team members, doctor, can be a great way to recalibrate your hygiene team and really get serious about diagnosing and treating periodontal disease. The information in that book will perhaps be life-changing for you. But interestingly enough, Aaron, the information in that book could be life-saving in your career. You could use that information book perhaps to not only change your patient's life, but you may actually save a life with the information in that book, given the tremendous impact that an infection in your mouth has with your overall health as well. Another great book. All right, the last one, Naren, is a single word title. It's titled Influence. It was written by the author Robert Cialdini, Dr. Robert. Now he's a PhD doctor, not an MD or a DMD, but he's a PhD doctor. He's earned a doctorate. Taught for many years at ASU. Happens to be a neighbor of mine, lives a few blocks away. And he now runs a consultancy all about the science and art of influence. That book can also be absolutely life-altering for you. When you understand the 6 fundamental principles of influence and how to apply them in your practice, you will see tremendous results. It is a must. I reread that at least once a year because I always discover new information in that book. I listen to it, reread it, because I understand new information based on where I am at that time in my life. Now, Naren, I know you have some comments on that because that's one of your favorites.
Oh yeah, it's one of my all-time favorites. If there's one person you should look up to learn about marketing and influence, it's Dr. Robert Cialdini. He is, I would argue, all-time great when it comes to influence. The funny thing is, he was not a marketer. He was a psychologist. I mean, a PhD in psychology, who just wanted to do some research. And he accidentally stumbled upon, during his research project, when he researched tens of thousands of people, that there are these 6 habits and when you, 6 principles. And when you use them, it creates a moment. In that moment, people are 3 times more likely to say yes. Couple of points. So if you want to grow the number of new patients, if you want to get people to accept your treatment, if you want to work effectively with your team, it's a great book. You understand psychology and how to use that to your advantage.
And it happens seamlessly. When you understand these 6 principles, it happens in a very elegant, seamless, or a non-salesy way. None of this is salesy.
Right.
It's that you influence people. Like for example, a great way to use this is let's say you have a patient that's in your practice that the only time they show up is when they have a problem. They have a toothache. And it's the only time they show up. Now, I think everyone in our listening audience can identify. They have people like that, right? Well,
Yes.
You can use some of the 6 fundamental principles of influence to influence that patient to change the way they handle their healthcare and their oral health. And they can now learn to be more proactive and learn to prevent problems in the future. That's an example of how you can use that information in a very, very useful way to not only affect your practice, but to improve someone's life rather than the old way of their thinking.
Absolutely. And it's a great book. We're going to put a link to all these books, Gary, and that way people can easily grab them and, either Audible or, like you said, ebook or download or print it.
Let me brag on you for just a minute, Naren. And Equa, I know that one of the things you've done with your team at Equa is the founder, or Naren's the founder of Equa Marketing Agency, and they work with dentists to help dentists master the world of digital marketing today. And I know one of the things you do in your website design is that you subtly include all 6 fundamental principles of influence as taught by Robert Cialdini. And those influence principles are woven into the fabric of every page of your website. I'm the beneficiary of that in the LifeSmiles website. And those principles are woven seamlessly. They're elegantly, it's organic, and it's done in such a way that when someone lands on our website, we influence them to not only choose our office for their care, but they will arrive to our office with a better understanding of what good oral health can mean in their lives. We've influenced them to think differently. So if you're thinking about that book and you read that book, I might suggest you take the next step and schedule a marketing strategy meeting with Equa, where Equa can share with you how these principles are applied in a very practical way to your website, so you can see the benefits of that in terms of your own marketing. Go to www.equa.com/MSM, and that stands for Marketing Strategy Meeting. Now, let me recap those 10 books. So these are 10 must reads. I'll number them 1 through 10 just so I remember to cover them, but I think they're all equal number 1s. Number 1, How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. Number 2, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey. Number 3, Good to Great by Jim Collins. Number 4, Leaders Eat Last by Simon Sinek. Number 5, The 1 Minute Manager by Ken Blanchard. Number 6, A Better Way, The Surprising Path to a Complete Life, the autobiography written by Peter Dawson. Number 7, A Philosophy of the Practice of Dentistry, written by Dr. L.D. Pankey. Number 8, Crucial Conversations. A group of authors, Patterson, Grenny, McMillan, and Switzler, and it's subtitled Tools for Talking When the Stakes Are High. Number 9, Beat the Heart Attack Gene by Bradley Bale, MD. And number 10, Influence by Robert Cialdini. Well, I hope you've enjoyed this diversion from our normal format. I want to share my passion for reading. Hopefully I've ignited some passion in all of you. There's a great reading list, and they will. And one last comment. Knowledge, you'll get knowledge by reading those books. But knowledge without application, think about that. Knowledge without application is merely entertainment. Now, you'll be entertained by reading those books. But more importantly, if you apply that knowledge, your life will change. You'll make changes that'll get you closer to where you want to go. So let me encourage you to apply that information. As we wrap up today, Naren, I want to thank you for co-hosting this episode, podcast with me. I want to thank your amazing team at Equa for all you guys do for the profession of dentistry, helping dentists master the world of digital marketing. I also want to thank all of our listeners. We appreciate each and every one of you. Perhaps you have a colleague that maybe enjoys reading. Please share this episode with them. We always welcome new listeners. If you don't already subscribe to the Thriving Dentist Show, wherever you get your podcast, just hit subscribe. It's free. It means every Wednesday when we upload a new episode, it'll be automatically uploaded for your listening convenience. On that note, let me simply thank you for the privilege of your time and tell you we will look forward to connecting with you on the next Thriving Dentist Show.